Hi everyone, it's Henry here, and in this video I'm going to take you through what I've been up to for the last couple of weeks in my spare, in fact, last couple of months in my spare time, working on with a mate of mine. Essentially a dream project, something I never got to have when I was growing up. I never had when I got back in the hobby. I've collected these things, I've never actually got around to doing it. And that is a sort of old school and Oldhammer inspired gaming board. I've got a gaming weekend coming up with some friends of mine, and I decided, together with my buddy Dan, we were going to make the board and we were going to do it in that Oldhammer style. You'll know I don't really do scenery videos, but there's something about nostalgia at the moment. I think we've been really busy finishing up our miniatures Kickstarter and getting ready to launch our new paint range, Mini Colour. You'll see a bunch of the new paint in this video because this is me just working on stuff for me that I thought I would film and share with you guys. So I hope you can enjoy it. My intentions were not to really look at any tutorials or anything past reading an ancient Games Workshop scenery book. I just thought, let's wing it. Let's find things out. And to be honest with you, I have never been more excited about my hobby than I am right now. I feel like I have unlocked a new passion with the scenery and the board building. We'll talk about that a little bit later on. So let's paint. So as I say, I was working on this board with my buddy Dan, and for a month or two, we would get a couple of hours on an afternoon, maybe in the week, where we would get in the garage and just work on the board a little bit. And we'd got the board completely finished, and we sealed it all in with this PVA water isopropyl mix. And we obviously got our ratios wrong because sadly it stripped all the paint and it left loads of tide marks and everything all over the board. So unfortunately, that meant I had to go back in and redo everything that we've done. So this is me just repainting over the hills. Just, you know, it's not really a tutorial, this bit. I just thought, you know, I'd share it. One thing I mentioned a minute ago, like, I have loved doing this scenery, and I think in the studio I can set it up in such a way that I might be able to do scenery projects and film them well. Not like this, obviously, but it does mean potentially moving somebody's bed. So we'll have to see about that. If you let me know in the comments how much, and if you would like me to start doing scenery stuff, then I absolutely will. But it might mean finding a new place for the helper. So as I've mentioned, the whole thing was very much old school inspired. We've all painted up a load of Empire miniatures and armies to have this great big grand sort of Empire melee. And for the board, I felt like, you know, Dan and I were like, it's got to be old school. You know, these are the kind of card buildings we got back when we first got in the game. Let's see what we can do with the modern kits and stuff that's available to us. So first up is that amazing tower that we saw in the background. And Dan and I recently picked up a 3D printer, a PLA printer. And I'll be honest with you, I'm blown away. The last time I played around with this stuff was a couple of years back. And whilst I absolutely can see the benefits of PLA, I could always see the benefits of it. It was sturdy, it was affordable, it was lightweight, all of that sort of thing. I couldn't really get over the layer lines that you would see in it. We picked this printer up, I say, a couple of months back now. It's one of those bamboo ones. I'll talk more about it when I know more about it. It wasn't, you know, we purchased it and everything and all that, but it's been awesome. And then we found this file for a 3D print of that old tower, or a homage, I guess, to that old tower. I was like, oh my god, let's have a go. Whilst it's better, it is still full of those layer lines. So I was sat there racking my brains trying to figure out how could I paint this to try and mitigate that problem. And I'd had a go a few years ago on a piece we did for the Mordheim John Blanche board, but obviously I've sort of thought about it a lot since then. And I found in my sort of, you know, toolbox this old pack of sponges I had bought off, like, you know, Temu or Amazon or something like that years ago. Someone had suggested using them for doing like reductive oil paint style, so removing the oil rather than using cotton buds and things like that. You could try these sponges. And I didn't really get on with it, if I'm honest. You'll know that's not typically how I paint, so I just didn't think anything of it. Threw them in the box. But when I started thinking about, well, I can't really dry brush because that's going to pick up all those layer lines, I thought, oh, I wonder if I could sponge. And the traditional sort of blue blister pack sponge that I would typically use, it's too coarse. You know, I think it would look sponged effectively, and that's not really what I was after. What I was after was trying to create light and shadow, to create a pre-shade on here that I could put a colour over, but without necessarily showing texture or the individual little textures that you would get from the more coarse sponge. So I tried out these makeup sponges, and they were brilliant. Really, really useful for it. You can see what it sort of does. It because it can't reach in there, it naturally leaves these quite exaggerated areas of shadow. And again, because I couldn't do the dry brushing, I also felt I couldn't really do washing. So typically I would dry brush and airbrush and wash if I was working on a plastic, say, GW kit building. I felt I couldn't do that because it would highlight those, what I felt were the drawbacks or shortcomings of the 3D prints, the layer lines. So I needed to create that kind of stark contrast on the table so that the scenery looked interesting. So I did the sponging. I then had to go in and do a little bit of sort of, I guess you call this black lining, where I go in and paint in the shadows where perhaps the sponge created that slightly messy blend. It didn't take long. It was super fun, big brushes. And now the most joyous part of my hobby for years, I was finally getting to paint a building that was reminding me of my childhood gaming. I was having loads of fun doing it with a sponge, and then I got to use one of our new paints on it, and it was perfect. So this is Midnight, one of the blues from our upcoming blue set. That's just a couple of coats of Midnight over there, and I mean, I couldn't be more excited at this point. I know it's just a blue roof, but I was sending everybody photos of it. It sounds daft, but I genuinely don't think I've been happier with anything I've painted in years. So, which is probably pretty damning, I guess, of everything else I've done. But also just how much I'm enjoying it. I was spraying that about 25 psi. I was using one of our old Gen 1 airbrushes. You can order the Gen 2 ones now, Signature Series airbrushes there. And this time, I think I thinned this one with Tamiya thinner. I've been playing around with different thinners for our paint. They've all worked well so far. Tamiya's worked well, Medea's worked well, Life Colour's worked well. We will inevitably develop a thinner to use with the paint. But in the meantime, I've been using those various ones. And that was, yes, maybe 2 coats, and it was thinned ever so slightly more than 50/50, so slightly more thinner than paint. And that was it. The blue was sorted. Then I mixed in a little bit of sky blue to the Midnight and just did loads of edge highlighting. So I edge highlighted every single edge of each tile, which took a little while, but stuck a podcast on and did it and enjoyed myself. So the next up was the 2 elements of stone. So we had the sort of the more grey stone, and then we had these more pronounced sort of flagstones that I wanted to do in that more blue stone style. So here I've used a couple of GW blue greys, the Fang and Fenrisian grey, and I've chosen to stipple it on using a dry brush here just to create a different sort of texture. And whilst the Fang or the dark blue is still wet, I just stipple on the lighter blue, and it just gave a nice sort of mottled effect, I thought, to the stone. And then it was a case of again going back in and sort of black lining here. I'm just using the darker grey to do it with. But again, sort of definitely, although this was scenery, and although I wanted to do it efficiently and quickly, I would say I was working on this in the spare time I had. It needed to be, I wanted to try and be neat and tidy, or I didn't want it to look sloppy. This is stuff that I'm going to use in nearly every game I play. I want it to look smart and evocative of that old style. It was an homage to that sort of older style, so not a direct copy, but I wanted to evoke a lot of that feeling of the old stuff. And for me, that meant quite high contrast and quite sort of crisp, easy to view detailing. So not loads of grunge and grime and all that sort of thing, which I love, don't get me wrong, but that wasn't the intention for this set of scenery that I was doing. So once that was done, I then go in and sponge the lighter grey. So I've used Mechanicus Standard Grey for this. And I tested it on another building to see which process was more efficient. And I found doing the greys in this order was better, because if I did get any of that lighter, this grey I'm working on here, the more neutral grey, if I did get any of that on the blue stone I'd already painted, I have left the edge highlighting stage of the blue stone until after I have done the more neutral grey. And that way, any that I did get over the blue stone, I just would go over when I was doing the edge highlight with the Fenrisian grey. So it was nice and efficient. It worked very, very well. And again, I think it was a nice sort of punchy difference of colour, which is what we wanted. I love the effect of this stone. I love it. Sort of gives you that render look. You can almost, some of the little stray edges that you get on there, I really enjoy that look. I feel like it shows like where they've used the trowels and stuff to apply the render and things. I just, really, really fab. Something I'm going to play with a lot for scenery. And I'll talk a little bit about the scenery at the end, but these 3D printed stuff has changed my opinion on stuff by a significant amount. Now, for the wood panels, on the original tower, this is just kind of rendered, or this is just sort of render plaster, but it's wooden boards on this 3D print. But I thought I'll try and stick to a similar kind of colour. So started off with Steel Legion. It's going to be fairly repetitive to a degree. It's just me doing lots of sponging on a lot of this. But as I say, this is as much for me to have a guide when I go and do more scenery in the future, and just share with you guys, what I've been up to. I know we've been a little quiet the last couple of weeks. I say with everything going on, it's just sort of not come to a head. But this was years of work. The last few weeks finally coming together. So as of next week, you'll start seeing an awful lot more of Andy and I and Ben and everyone and sort of Colt 2.0, I guess. And I'm really looking forward to sharing all of that with you guys. And so I just started working up through the lighter colours, Steel Legion, Xandri Dust, that nice kind of yellowy tan colour, and then mixing in Karak Stone. I think the wooden planking really demonstrates the benefit of that sponging technique. We don't need to go in and do any washing because the sponge isn't going into those recesses at all between the wooden planks. Again, I've gone in, I've done edge highlighting on every edge with the lightest colour. It was time consuming, but it wasn't laborious. It was simple to do. You were using a nice big brush. It was really fun getting the bigger brushes out and working with them. And the end effect was I was enjoying it so much it didn't feel like a chore. Then I've gone back in with really thinned down Steel Legion here, and I've just sort of washed this into some of the recesses just to give that little kind of colour gradient effect on the buildings. I think it looked pretty cool in the artwork or the photos, the old stuff, and I kind of wanted to try and recreate a little bit of that kind of style with it. Then the log beams sort of making up the skeleton of the tower. In the original tower, these are, this is an homage, it's not meant to be a direct copy. So in the original tower, these are just the same colour as the render, but I wanted it to be a bit more fun. And when you think of Oldhammer, or certainly when I think of Oldhammer, old Warhammer, sort of 90s Warhammer, red is it's a big, strong colour. So I thought, well, let's choose some nice red browns. So here I've used mahogany and jasper from the mini colour range. Really liked them. Again, it's got that kind of old school vibe to it. And then I've used a colour here called Yellowish Rust. It's an old colour, Panzer Aces by Vallejo model colour. I don't know if they make a modern equivalent. Something like Tau Light Ochre probably isn't a million miles away, if you really want to sort of try and copy it. Excuse me. But that's one of the other reasons you haven't seen much from me for the last few weeks is I've been pretty under the weather with some nasty bug as well. So yeah, just edge highlighting. Keep it relatively wet mix on the palette, not too wet that it just washes off the brush, but not need to thin it a little so that it moves off the end of the brush nice and easily when we touch the model, not having to use too much pressure. One thing I found out is you really go through paint when you're doing scenery. I'm going to have to replace a fair few pots after doing everything for this board. So next up was the chapel. Now this was a slightly different proposition. This is an old, or current in fact, an old and current GW plastic kit that they brought back out for the old world. And this was one I had been gifted many, many years ago. It was in a real bad state. And I had painted it up all grimdark and this, that, and the other. But that wouldn't work with the rest of our terrain. So we sprayed over it and repainted it, and certain elements of that caused some rather lengthy issues. But I've done the roof in exactly the same pre-shade way. I wanted to paint this in exactly the same way. Even though it's the plastic building, I want to paint it the same way as the 3D printed ones. So over that sponge pre-shade, I've then sprayed it mini colour cherry. And now I'm edge highlighting every single tile, all the edges, using a mix of two of our oranges. So mini colour marmalade and mini colour papaya mixed together. This was the longest part of any of them. I got through a good chunk of a podcast with that one. But absolutely worth it, I think. Yes, I 100% could have just dry brushed it if I wanted to. I wanted to, because there wouldn't have been the risk of that layer line thing, but I wanted to paint it the same way as all the other buildings. So on the table, they should look fairly unified, even though I must say the amount of detail on this is just frustrating. I did not enjoy painting this chapel which is a real shame because I have loved these old bits of scenery that they brought out for Warhammer Fantasy. I have most of them. I've collected them over the years on eBay and things like that. And having done that 3D printed one, I will be eBaying them because I'm not getting that same level of satisfaction. Perhaps for a diorama or something like that, or for the shelf, I'll paint one really, really nicely. But things like the chapel and the cottage and stuff, I'm like, nah, give me a print of a old school inspired one, yes please. So this is what I mentioned before about the Fenrisian Grey highlight. This was a practice piece, and this is where I discovered I should do this after doing the render. So one of the biggest issues with the chapel was I had used in the past to hide the huge great gaps on this model that had been given me. I just filled it in with loads of sand and then painted that to look like moss, but I did that at the end of the paint job. Of course, having then primed it and repainted it, that's all now just there. I've had to paint around it all, which was really bloody annoying. But when it came to paint, I was like, I'll show you some oils, show you some whatever. And I thought, oh, hang on, I've got that dirty down moss I've never used. Let's just slot that on and see what happens, which is exactly what I've done here. And it looks fine. So that was nice. I also like that it's pretty bright and in your face. So even though it is that kind of grungy look, it's still, I think, fairly in keeping with that more Oldhammer style. Now, another iconic scenery piece from back in the 90s was the Elven Obelisk, or the Waystone, the Elven Waystone that they did. Again, turns out people do files for all this stuff, so I'm sure loads of you are aware of this. I am very new to all of that. So yeah, very happy. I'm using some similar colours here that I've done for the sort of tan wood colours, but I wanted it to be lighter. So rather than going over a pre-shaded, a white over black pre-shade, I've base coated it with the Steel Legion. Then I'm going on, giving it a real heavy sponging with the Xandri Dust. And then this is now a departure, so I've switched to Rakarth Flesh here, which is that slightly more pink than the Karak Stone is. Similar value, so it's still a good highlight, but I say it's a little bit more pink and should help just separate it a little and make it look like a different material than what perhaps those lads of the Empire have used for their stuff. And again, more sponging. One thing I definitely found was keeping the paint quite thin for the sponging was very effective. Even though the sponge would really suck that up, it was much nicer to paint with. You got much softer, more gentle sort of blends and effects on the model. Whereas if I just went in the neat paint, it wasn't. I didn't care for it. So this has all been a learning process for me. It's the first time I've done any of this sort of thing. I'm really enjoying it. And then as a final highlight, I've used Mini Colour Stone, which is a nice sort of off-white. I will probably try and pick up some more of these makeup sponges. I believe you can get them in different shapes, which would be interesting to play around with, but we'll see. Now, because this is also a PLA, a 3D print, a PLA print, I can't use the washes, or I don't want to use the washes on it, so I've got to do a little bit of that black lining. Here I'm using Mini Colour Chocolate, which is a nice sort of rich dark brown colour, something like Rhinox Hide you could use, would give you a similar colour. And it was just a case of going around everything. But I absolutely think it's worthwhile. I think that coupled with the edge highlighting, it just gives you that extra definition. So you can see that side's not been done. That side has been. Yeah, really, really big fan. The obelisk ended up taking way longer than I thought it was going to take, actually. But there you go. And then for the gems, I had a look at the old one. And they had these nice green gems on the side of it. So I thought, great, let's have a go. Another chance to use some more of the new paints. And this is me just play. This is the final sort of, or the most recent or up-to-date batch of the paints. So it's really good fun to work with them. I've used a bunch of them on the army to go along with this table, which I will probably show you in next week's video. I'll do a little recap of the gaming weekend and I'll show you the little project I did for that. But I've used bottle green here as the base. Then I'm going to use malachite. I tried on one of the gems. It's the third one you'll see me paint in a second. I gave it a couple of coats of polyurethane gloss varnish because I thought maybe that would help smooth out would sit in between the layers, and it kind of worked. If I'd had like that UV resin, I might have been tempted to use that, but I did it and it didn't really make that much difference, so I didn't bother doing it on the other three. And then final highlight using cabbage here, but a nice little combo first time I'd used this combo, these 3 greens, and I was like, oh, that's nice. Pop that down in the recipe book for future projects for sure. You're not going to see me using tons of mini colour over the next few months until you're able to actually get it yourselves. I don't want to do that. But you will, for the next couple of weeks, see me use a lot of mini colour, because obviously we've got the campaign running at the minute for it, and I'd like to show people as many examples as I can of it being used. But it doesn't mean you're only ever going to see mini colour and stuff on the channel. It's just where our paints are the colours we want, that's what we'll use, because that's why we made them, because we think they're the best versions of those colours. The little reflection on it, they did this kind of cheesy little snowflakey starburst thing. I was like, oh yeah, gonna have to do a little bit of that on there as well. Why not? It's been so much fun leaning into that Oldhammer, inspiration. I'm going to do a project next year, an Oldhammer project. I can't decide on what. I will talk more on the podcast next week, or over on stream, over on Discord, about upcoming projects. We've got the Super Heavy Challenge coming up very soon, but you're going to start seeing more personal projects and perhaps multi-part series and stuff here over on YouTube, rather than just banging out new releases all the time. It's something I want to do. It's something I'm passionate about, and something I think you guys will enjoy. So yeah, we'll talk a bit more about some upcoming. But I would like next year, I would like an Oldhammer project to be in there. Thinking maybe some Kev Adams orcs might be good fun, because I think our mini colour paints will be absolutely perfect for that. And here I'm just little edge highlighting using stone. Again, that edge highlighting I think is crucial to this. I will varnish them all up and protect them, obviously. And then finally the basing. So you've obviously seen from the board, it's that proper old school flock. So we just wanted to tie the buildings in a little bit. So I'm just giving him a quick green base. This is frog, mini colour frog green. Just so that in case any of the flock comes off, there's a little bit of green underneath it. Dan actually based this tower up, and I really like the little rubble mix he's used. I don't know what it is. I hope it's not like a homemade one. I hope I can just go and get it, because I really like the variety in there. It's got loads of very rounded sort of little pebbles in it. It looks really cool. And as I mentioned, this is the old Gen 1 Infinity I'm using here. If you pop over, the link will be in the description, but you can pre-order your second generation cold paint airbrushes now. I will talk about those a lot more in upcoming videos, but they are up on there now. I believe they release in November. So then it was just a case of PVA. I'm sure loads of you were like, well, I know all about this. I didn't know tons about all this, so I'm having loads of fun doing it. Then I wanted real old-fashioned flock, so we went to a company called Javis, picked up a load of flock from there. So just a little mix of their sort of autumn one here, and then I think it's like medium green, I think is the one we used. If you would like a list of everything we've used for the board, please let me know, and I will include it in next week's video when I sort of talk about the gaming weekend, and I'll show you some more photos of the board in action with all the armies on it and stuff like that. It's quite fun as well. My gaming group I'm very, very fortunate to have such a positive gaming group, very supportive, and they paint stuff. We talked about doing this joint Empire project about a year ago when we last had a weekend away, and everyone's on board, and there's double-digit thousands of points of Empire coming that everyone's worked on to play with, so I cannot wait to see it all on this table. So there we are, the finished buildings. I couldn't be happier, if I'm honest. There's always the temptation to go in and do more, but I think when you're on a really tight deadline, it's always good, isn't it, for making you reassess what's essential and what's not. And actually now having put them down on the finished tile and looking at them from that sort of 2-3 foot away, as you would be with gaming, just with the normal overhead lights on in the room, I think they're bang on for what we wanted. Dan's worked on a load of woods, which is awesome, and I'll make sure I get loads and loads of shots and stuff from the weekend. You can see it all sort of in action and stuff. As you can tell from these shots, I'm not really equipped at the minute to take good photos of large things like the scenery and the tiles and all of that, but I really want to start doing it. I mean, think about it, things like, wouldn't it be cool to do, I know, Osgiliath, or it'd be cool to do, maybe a Baron's War board, of a local castle, or a Trench Crusade board. I finish off my Necromunda board. All these sort of terrain scenery ideas I've had and never thought I could really do them. I absolutely, I'm going to pick up some books, start reading, and start having a go. And I think that's probably the biggest take home for me from this is I've had all this stuff sat in boxes for years. It's time to just get on, do the stuff that makes you happy, tick it off. Nostalgia is epic. And I hope you guys will enjoy the next few years on the channel, because I think I'm going to be doing a lot more stuff around that is kind of my hobby bucket list. And I think that's where I'm at right now personally. I want to start working through it. I've had something called Project 20 I've talked about with Ben and stuff for a while, and I might chat to you guys a little bit more about it on the podcast, and we'll start seeing it come to fruition here on the channel. So bigger projects, bit more excitement, bit more engagement with you guys as well. I'd love to hear any tips and things you've got from doing the scenery and things you found out. I'd also love if you've got some cool scenery pieces or some files that you know of, like let me know in the comments, because I'd really I need to do a river, right? I need to find a water mill, definitely. Maybe an inn. I've got to populate Stirland right with this board. So, and hopefully you guys can see it grow over the years along with all the other ones. So as ever, if you've got any questions, I don't think there will be many on this one. I say it was more just sharing with you guys what I've been up to. But if you do have any, pop them down in the comments. I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Remember, the paint campaign is down there. The link is in the description. It's going great guns. We're so proud of this. You'll be able to see us talking about it and using it loads on here, on the Twitch channel, on the Culture of Paint YouTube channel. You can see all the podcasts on there. Check it all out. If you've got any questions, you just shout and let us know. Thank you ever so much for all of your support. We wouldn't be doing this without you guys. The Patreon lot are absolute legends. And if you can't support us over there, where you can get your extra videos and other things to do with us, then likes, subscribes, comments, all of that here on YouTube make a massive, massive difference. And I appreciate every single one of them. So I can't wait to show you from photos and stuff of the game from the weekend. Take care, and I'll see you next time.